There is one word this show drops almost as a throwaway line, and once you hear it, you cannot watch a single episode of this town the same way again. Because that word isn't describing a place. It's describing a book. A cursed one. One that never lets its readers leave the page. Every horror town has a gimmick. A curse, a monster, a reason people can't leave. This one gave us something different. It gave us a word. And the word wasn't trap. It wasn't prison. It wasn't even nightmare. The word was story. And once you actually sit with that word, instead of letting it slide past you like background noise, the whole town stops looking like a place and starts looking like something written, something bound, something that can be opened and closed like a cover snapping shut on a shelf. This is the theory that the town isn't cursed land. It's a cursed book. And everyone trapped inside it isn't a prisoner. They're a character, living out pages that were already written before they ever took their first wrong turn down that road. Start with the thing the show keeps repeating without ever explaining outright. People don't stumble into this town by accident the way you'd expect from a normal curse. There's no swamp that swallows cars, no fog bank that disorients drivers, no creeping supernatural pull dragging people off the highway one at a time in 100 different ways. It's always the same sequence. Always a road. Always something blocking it. Always a turn that should lead away and instead leads here. If this were a real location with a real curse, you'd expect the methods of arrival to vary as wildly as the people arriving. Different countries, different roads, different reasons for being out there in the first place. Instead, you get the same opening every time, beat for beat, like a director refusing to change the first scene no matter who's in it. That's not how geography behaves. That's how a chapter 1 behaves. Every reader, no matter who they are or where they're from, starts on the same page. The road isn't where the curse begins. The road is the first line of the book, printed the same way every single time, because the book demands you start there. And once you let yourself see the town as a book instead of a place, the cracks in everything else start to make a strange kind of sense. Take the monsters. For something that's supposed to be hunting people down, they are remarkably bad at finishing the job quickly. They don't rush in. They don't ambush with any real efficiency. They linger at the edges. They let themselves be seen before they strike. They draw the moment out far longer than a creature that simply wants you dead ever would. A predator that wants its prey gone is fast. It's clean. It's over before you can scream. These things are the opposite of that. They perform. They circle. They let the dread build instead of cutting it short. And that only makes sense if the actual goal was never the kill. The actual goal was the tension. A horror story that ends in the first 5 minutes isn't a story anymore, it's an anecdote. So the monsters don't behave like predators failing at their job. They behave like something keeping a plot alive, stretching out every encounter exactly long enough to keep the reader turning pages instead of closing the book early. Now look at the protections people find inside this place. The charms, the small mercies, the supplies that show up right when someone is about to give up completely. These things are real. They work. People have used them and survived because of them. And that's not something you can wave away as fake comfort. But look closer at what they actually cost the people who rely on them. Every charm that holds a monster back for one more night. Every scrap of food that appears right as starvation starts to feel inevitable. Every small miracle that arrives exactly on schedule. All of it does one thing above everything else. It keeps hope alive. And hope in this town is not a comfort. It's fuel. The town runs on it. The people inside keep hoping, which keeps them trying, which keeps them moving through the plot instead of lying down and refusing to play their part anymore. Every kindness this place offers isn't kindness at all. It's pacing. It's the author making sure the reader doesn't put the book down too soon. Then there's the cycle. The show has already confirmed in no uncertain terms that the people running through this nightmare right now are not the first ones to run through it. Long before the current cast arrived, there were others. Others who believed they had finally figured it out. Others who thought they were the one chosen to break the cycle for good. And every single one of them failed. That detail alone reframes the entire show. It means none of this started with the people you've been following. It means the town has done this before. The exact same shape, over and over, a chosen figure convinced they finally understand the rules, an ending where they don't make it out anyway. And when the show goes further and shows us that 2 people we know now were also 2 people from a much earlier round of this same nightmare, wearing different names, carrying memories that come flooding back the moment the right melody plays, That's not a coincidence the writers slipped in for fun. That's a confession. The story isn't rhyming these characters by accident. It's telling you they've been cast in this role before, and they will likely be cast in it again, because the book doesn't end when one reading finishes. It just closes and waits to be opened back up to page 1. Here's the part that should unsettle you the most. If this were simply the same book read over and over, word for word, you'd expect everything to repeat exactly. Same people, same relationships, same outcomes down to the smallest detail. But that isn't what happens. The two people who once lived an entire history together come back as total strangers, with no memory of each other, no pull, no recognition at all, even while trapped in the exact same nightmare on the exact same day. That's the cruelest design choice imaginable, and it tells you something important. This isn't a clean reread. The broad strokes hold. The roles stay the same. The task stays the same. The ending more often than not stays the same. But the cast underneath those roles gets reshuffled every single time, and the people playing those roles are sent in with no memory of ever having played them before. It's less like rereading an old book and more like restaging the same play with an entirely new company of actors who have never seen the script, who have to fumble their way through marks that were set for them long before they ever walked on stage. And if you needed one more piece of evidence that this is a book rather than a place, look at the instruction the children in this story keep repeating to anyone who'll listen. Not run, not fight, not escape. Just one word: remember. And that word only makes sense as an instruction if there's something underneath it to actually remember. You don't tell someone to recall a thing that has never happened to them. You only say remember when there's a version of events buried somewhere beneath the surface, waiting to be dug back up. The children aren't begging people to discover something new. They're begging them to recall something the town has already put them through, possibly more than once. Possibly more times than anyone trapped here could ever count. This is where the show's strangest power fits perfectly into the theory. There's a character in this story who can step backward into moments that already happened, not to change them. The show is firm, almost stubborn about that point. Whatever happened, happened. When this character slips back and performs an action that was already part of the story everyone watched unfold seasons earlier, she isn't rewriting a single thing. She was always the one who did it. Her trip backward is only the moment the audience finally learns whose hands were behind an event we'd already seen play out. People would call that a paradox in any other story. But under this theory, it isn't a paradox at all, because you cannot create a paradox inside a book. The pages are already printed. She isn't bending time when she steps backward. She's turning to a chapter that was written in ink long before she ever arrived to read it. Now push a little further, into the parts of the town that hold the whole thing together physically. There are strange structures scattered around this place, objects everyone assumes exist purely as decoration or ritual, and the show has been fairly direct about at least one layer of what they mean. They carry a melody, a code, something tied directly back to that same word, remember. That part is more or less confirmed, and it's already a satisfying answer on its own. But here's the harder question worth asking. What if these objects aren't only carrying a clue inside the story? What if they're also doing something structural, something closer to the binding that holds an entire book together rather than a hint scribbled inside its pages? Because if that's true, then everyone who has ever tried to tear these objects down, believing that destroying them would break the curse and free everyone trapped here, has had it backward the entire time. You don't free a story by ripping out its binding. You destroy the book. And when a book is destroyed, it doesn't release its characters into freedom. It simply closes and waits for someone to open it again, back at the very first page. Two figures in this town seem to read the rules differently than everyone trapped alongside them, and that difference matters more than it first appears. One has been here longer than almost anyone else, drawing images of things he was never taught, describing details he has no logical way of interpreting, speaking like someone who has lived through a version of this nightmare before the version we're currently watching. If anyone in this story is carrying fragments of an older draft buried somewhere in his memory, it's him. The other moves through the horror with an unsettling kind of calm, treating the danger less like a random nightmare and more like a system with rules underneath it. Quests to complete, logic to follow, a structure beneath the chaos that everyone else seems blind to. He behaves like someone who, on some level, already understands he's living inside a story rather than simply surviving one. Then there are the two figures who don't seem bound by any of the town's rules at all. And they may be the clearest proof of everything laid out so far. One walks freely in daylight, completely unaffected by the one law that governs every other creature in this place, the law that drives everything else underground until dark. He isn't hiding from the rules. He simply isn't subject to them. And watch what he actually does with that freedom. He warns people, early on, in vague and cryptic ways, about digging too deep, learning too much, uncovering things faster than the story intends for them to be uncovered. When he finally steps forward to deliver consequences to someone who learned too quickly, he doesn't behave like a monster feeding on fear. He behaves like an editor, someone whose entire function is keeping readers from skipping ahead in a book they were never supposed to finish early. And when he speaks to the character capable of slipping backward through time, the warning he gives her isn't about changing a moment or a single event. It's about changing the story itself. That's not the language of a monster. That's the language of something that knows, completely and without doubt, that it exists inside a book, and whose entire job is making sure nobody closes that book before it's ready to be closed. The other Unbound figure sits at the opposite end of that same idea. He shows up without explanation, knows things he has no business knowing, and never quite feels like he belongs to the same rules everyone else in town is forced to follow. If the first figure is the story's awareness of itself, walking around enforcing its own structure, this one might be something even stranger. Not a character written into the plot at all, but the surface the plot is written onto. The blank page underneath every word, every chapter, every cursed retelling. And here's the pattern that ties every single piece of this together. Every time someone in this town gets dangerously close to understanding the full truth, something always interrupts them. The conversation breaks off at the worst possible moment. The person holding the missing piece of the puzzle dies, or forgets, or gets pulled away just before they can say the one sentence that would have made everything click. Plans that should have worked fall apart in the final few feet. Once, you could call that bad luck. Across years of this happening, again and again, in almost exactly the same shape every time, it stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like something deliberate. It starts looking like the story protecting its own structure, refusing to let itself be solved before it's finished being told. A mystery understood too early stops being a mystery. And this book clearly isn't finished with the people trapped inside it yet. Of course, no theory like this survives without something pushing back against it. And the honest version of this idea has to sit with that resistance instead of brushing past it. The town is physical. People bleed inside it. People starve inside it. Walls get built, and those walls hold weight, hold pressure, hold back real danger. A Cursed Book is a beautiful frame for everything strange about this place. But the show keeps insisting, again and again, on the reality of flesh and blood and pain. That tension doesn't disappear just because the metaphor is satisfying. There's a second crack worth admitting too, and it cuts straight at the most comforting part of this entire theory. Everything rests on that one word, remember, and on trusting that it points towards something true, something worth recovering. But this place has already shown a willingness to plant ideas inside people's heads that were never really theirs to begin with. If a memory can be placed there rather than recovered, then the entire foundation shifts. Remember might not be a gift handed down by the children trying to help people escape. It might be the most convincing trap the story has ever built, the most effective reason imaginable to keep hoping, keep believing there's a way out, keep turning the page instead of putting the book down for good. What can be said with confidence is this. The cycles are confirmed. The same souls returning across different names confirmed. The instruction to remember, repeated too many times to ignore. The character capable of stepping into moments that already happened without ever changing a single word of them, confirmed. The meaning hung on top of those confirmed pieces is still open to argument, still shaped by whoever is doing the reading. But this town has every reason in the world to want that meaning hung exactly where this theory hangs it. Because a reader who believes there's something worth remembering is a reader who keeps reading. And that's where this leaves things. The children in this story never tell anyone to escape. They tell them to remember.
Tabitha!
And you only ask someone to
Jade!
remember something they have already lived through once before. The first person ever pulled into this nightmare wasn't the last, and she didn't make it out either. The one person capable of walking backward through these events can visit every chapter she wants, but she cannot change a single word printed inside them. And every time someone gets close enough to read the final page, the book finds a way to close itself and start over from the beginning. Somewhere, right now, on some quiet stretch of road, a tree is about to fall. The crows are about to gather. Someone is about to take a wrong turn that was always going to lead them here. Same story. New faces. Page 1 all over again.